Okay, we're live again. We're live again, Alexander. How are you doing, Alexander, this Tuesday?
I'm doing very well in our disintegrating kingdom. I'm only being slightly ironic there. We're now having more problems on the government gilt market. And to absolutely nobody's surprise, the Bank of England appears to be expanding and extending its bond buying program. We'll be discussing that further in this show. But it looks like QE forever. So, I mean, more about that, I'm sure, as we continue.
Well, we have someone else who is in your disintegrating kingdom joining us. Someone else joining us from London. A very special guest, a fantastic channel on YouTube, and I believe on other platforms as well. We have AJ from PTE Geopolitics. AJ, we've been wanting to get you on for a while now. We finally have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Can I just say it's an absolute honor to meet you guys, finally be on this chat. Yeah, we have been trying to get this live stream together for a while now. But yeah, it's an absolute pleasure and great work, by the way. You guys are doing a great thing, and that's what it's all about. You know, the world needs an alternative view. You know, with everything that's going on. You know,
yes,
we need you guys.
Yes, it does. We thank you for joining us, AJ. So we have AJ from London. We have the Oracle of London with us. We are going to discuss the UK. We're going to discuss Liz Truss. She's calling a special meeting for NATO so that they can focus on Ukraine, because Liz Truss doesn't have anything else that she needs to take care of at all. She could put all her time and attention towards Ukraine. Before we get started, Alexander, and I pass it off to you, let's say a quick hello to everyone that is watching us on Rumble, ODYSEE, YouTube, and the Duran.locals.com, as well as everyone that is joining us on the Telegram chat. And a quick hello to our awesome, amazing, super cool moderators. We have Valies in the house. Facts Matter is also in the house. That handle has been changed. Who used to be Facts Matter, or who is now Facts Matter? Let me know. We have Spartan Warrior Queen. The legend Spartan Warrior Queen is with us as well. And I also saw Zariel somewhere hidden away in the chat. Zariel was also somewhere in the chat there. And I believe I also saw Alan Watson and Reckless Abandon somewhere. But anyway, thank you to our moderators. You are the absolute best. Alexander, Liz Truss is calling a special meeting for NATO. Ukraine is on her mind.
Well, absolutely.
Much like her predecessor, by the way, Boris Johnson.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I ask you just a quick question before you get started, Alexander? Is Liz Truss going to be making a trip like Boris did to Kiev?
It is an absolute certainty. I mean, it's the only question of time. And of course, she has to choose to pick a time carefully now, because we see these Russian missile strikes on Kiev. And to be frank, I mean, she's not going to go there if there's any physical danger, and nor should she. She is, after all, the prime minister. So I mean, but you know, assuming things calm down, that there are few missile strikes, that there's the opportunity to go, it is inevitable that she will go. Because here's the extraordinary thing: we are in a severe economic crisis in Britain. I don't think anybody, whatever your political position, disputes that. I was saying just before we started this program, we're going to discuss this a lot more with AJ. We have, not that this is of great interest to most British people, but it is important, we're having more problems in the government bond markets in London. There's still reluctance by some investors to buy British government bonds. The Bank of England is now having to extend its buying program of government bonds. It's having to increase, in other words, QE, that which just a few weeks ago it was telling us that it was winding down. And overall, and indisputably, we have a gathering economic crisis. Businesses are shutting. If you spend your time in London, both AJ and I live in London, we can see the signs of deterioration all around us. But if you go to our media, it's really striking. You go to our media, the focus still is on Ukraine. It is still the overriding fixation of the British political class including, of course, the Prime Minister and the key members of her government. And I sense also the opposition as well. The Labour Party, if they were to come to power, it wouldn't be different. So even as things fall apart all around them, Ukraine for them remains the big thing. And I have to say, I find this very strange. I find this completely bizarre. And I wonder how long it will be before more and more people in Britain start to complain about it. So, AJ, maybe you want to comment about this. Do you get the same sense as me that, as I said, they're all more focused at the moment on Ukraine, calling G7 meetings, talking about stepping up arms sales to Ukraine, looking for ways to provide Ukraine with economic assistance, even as things in Britain economically are going from bad to worse? Is this also your own sense?
Of course, Alex, of course. I work as a civil servant, so I kind of speak to a lot of people, and I also meet her in the lift at some point. I'm talking about Liz Truss. But Liz Truss is the first UK Prime Minister who has broken tradition. When she first became Prime Minister, the first world leader she called was Zelensky. She did not bother calling Biden, and she was the first UK Prime Minister to do so. She has pretty much failed in every single position she has been in, whether it's trade secretary, foreign secretary. And we seem to be, as British, we seem to be promoting those who fail. And it seems to be a very much a good to-go thing. And everybody talks behind the scenes at my workplace. And I knew that Liz Truss was going to be the next leader way back in March. And I believe in my channel, I was telling my viewers how she's going to be the next prime minister. I'm 100% sure of it, because you hear like whisperings and rumblings behind the scenes. And I just knew what a disaster she would be. The only reason she became prime minister is because she had a very strong lobby from the Israeli lobby, from the banking sector, oil sector. So they've been lobbying hard for her to be the next prime minister, and especially the military-industrial complex, the neocons. She was saying the right stuff when she was she was basically talking about having an Asian NATO, how China needs to be controlled. She was being anti-Russian. She was saying all of the right stuff that the neocons love, that the military-industrial complex loved. And I just knew, even though she was really bad at her job, that she would be the next prime minister. And you can just see everything that's happening behind the scenes. They didn't care who she was. As far as they're concerned, she is somebody that they can control. And you can see when she first came into power, you can see all of these actions that she's done so far. She's not doing it for the British people. She's not doing it for the public. For example, the tax rate cut, which is going to only affect the rich. She's released the bankers' bonuses, which will make the bankers even more rich. She's obviously added all of these new fracking licensing to make the oil barons more rich. If you look at every single step that she's taken, none of it is for the British people. She's taken all these steps for the people that put her in power. And one of the things she's also done is she's recently come and met the Israeli lobby, and she openly said that she's a Zionist. And this clip has been going around all of the Middle East, that she's a Zionist. She's looking to open an embassy in Jerusalem. And she's already alienated the Middle East. She's already alienated the Chinese. She's already alienated, obviously, the Russian. And now she's going around saying Macron's a friend. She wants to make friends with Europe, because, she's an absolute disaster, guys. And you can see, I'm just surprised how long she's lasting in this job. Her assistant, Kwasi Kwarteng, who's supposed to be this most intelligent guy in the parliament. I mean, this guy was in University Challenge, and only the best and brightest people go to the University Challenge. He's been to Harvard. He's got economics degrees, PhDs, been to Cambridge. So this guy, he's supposed to know everything about the economy. But guess what? He knows nothing. He knows nothing. A wise
Mm.
man told me once, if you really want to know about the UK economy, go out there, speak to the businesses, find out, where the profits and
Mm.
losses are, find out where the bottlenecks are. That's how you know the economy. And this is what I do. I go around, I talk to businesses, I talk to shop owners, I find out what's actually happening with your business. Where is your money going? What's your profit? What compare it to last year. And I mean, every single business I speak to, there are bottlenecks. For example, I went to a coffee shop last week, and the guy said he's about to close down. He can't afford it. I said, okay, why can't you afford it? So he said, first of all, my gas bills have gone up 5 times. And secondly, this Colombian coffee that I import from Colombia, that's gone up 5 to 6 times as well. Because this is the cause of inflation. It's the high gas prices, it's the high oil prices. And because of that, it takes, you got to pay for oil to transport it all the way from Colombia to UK.
Mm.
You can't increase your interest rates and expect your um, economy to go back down. You can't expect your inflation to go back down, because inflation is not just about the money printing. It's about what's happening around the world. And the main problem is the high gas prices, the high oil prices. And nobody seems to be talking about that. Nobody seems to be taking that into account. The Bank of England thinks by increasing
Mm.
the interest rates, they can bring inflation down. But no, inflation is not because of reckless money printing, which is obviously the case as well. But the main reason is the high oil prices, high gas prices, because the transporting goods around the world has become extra expensive. Inflation around the world is going
Mm.
up. Then you got American dollars, which is getting stronger, which is making the pound weaker. That's also causing an effect as well. And you're right, Alex. You go to businesses, every single business I speak to, everybody's struggling.
Mm.
The pubs are closing down. Small businesses are shutting down everywhere. Families are struggling as well. I mean, I know 2 families and friends of families who have actually lost their homes already, and this is going to get, I can imagine the next few months where it's going to get much worse, because all they're doing is increasing interest rates. And ordinary people who have been living on 0% interest for the past 5-6 years in the property suddenly find out they have to pay extra £500 on top of extra 2,500 on the gas bills, electricity bills. People just can't afford it, and people are losing homes left, right, and center at the moment. And you're right. All they are talking about is Ukraine. You go to the
Mm.
BBC and the front page news, Russia is blowing up Kiev, and you see there's a little side article saying, oh, by the way, Bank of England has decided to buy some more bonds because nobody's buying bonds, and they're going to have to print money to buy them. And this is absolutely ridiculous. And this is all down to British foreign policy. Because when you piss off the Chinese, I mean, back in 2008, when USA needed a lot of help, Chinese were there to buy a lot of American bonds. They bought a lot of American debt and helped the world get back on its feet in terms of its economy. But now you got Liz Truss, who has completely alienated the Chinese. They're not going to come and buy any bonds from UK.
Mm.
You have a huge population of Russians living in UK as well. You've got a lot of oligarchs. They're pissed off all of the Russians as well. Russia's not going to come near UK bonds. The
Mm.
Americans are not going to buy UK bonds because they're worthless, because you've seen how far the pound has fallen down compared to the US. Europeans have got their own problems. They've alienated the whole of Middle East because of Liz Truss's I'm a Zionist speech.
Mm.
And who's left? There's nobody left to buy UK bonds because
Absolutely.
they've alienated the whole world against the UK. And it's absolutely ridiculous how the government has put us in this position and
Yeah.
how they're getting away with it. And let me tell you something, guys. The British public, I feel that they've been made into brainless robots over the years. And the British public have been fed a diet of reality TV, trash TV,
Mm.
social media. I speak to people around around the UK. I know a lot of people, and nobody actually knows anything about politics or speaks politics. The first thing they want to
Mm.
speak about is what's happening in Love Island or what's happening in Keeping Up with
Mm.
the Kardashians. These are just, people have been fed a diet of this trash
Yeah.
TV and reality trash, and they've been keeping them dumb. They are just keeping them dumb. And another thing I've noticed is everybody that I know, all these youngsters I know, and even middle-aged men I know, they all seem to be smoking cannabis or weed or something. And I'm thinking, when's the last time I've seen a drugs raid in UK? I've not heard about one for like 10 years. I think what they're doing is just letting all the drugs come into the borders. They're not stopping anyone for cannabis. They're not stopping anyone for weed. But one thing that weed does to people, it demotivates them. You don't feel like going out to protest. You don't feel like doing anything. You just want to relax. And I think what they're doing, they're just letting all these drugs come in, fill these UK people with drugs and weed and all sorts. So they don't go out and speak out. They don't go out and protest. And even young kids, I know, they're just around the corner just smoking weed and something. Where the hell do you get this from? Because nowadays you don't need to go to a drug dealer to get them. You can just order it on the internet. And I spoke to young kids where they said they order it on Snapchat and all these Instagram and stuff. I was like, how the hell did you do that? And how did these people get away with it? It's crazy how far the British society has come, Alex, and I'm just completely shocked by it all. Absolutely shocked by the level of stupidity. And I don't know if this is all planned by the government to keep the people dumb and stupid, so they don't stand up, they don't protest. But you just look around you, and for example, the Bank of England, when he had to pay 65 billion to buy its own bonds, and how close they came to destroying the pensions of all of these people. That day I was walking around the streets, and people were not aware of anything. People were completely oblivious to how close Britain came to a disaster. Nobody knows anything about it. Nobody cares. And it's an absolute shock how British society has become, Alex. And I'm just completely shocked by it all.
Now, well, you made a lot of points there. Let's just unpack some of them. Let me go through them. First of all, I completely agree with you about Liz Truss. I ought to say, and I'm going to make a straightforward admission, I did not expect her to become Prime Minister. I said it is inconceivable that in Britain such a person could ever become Prime Minister. If you'd asked me back in March that Liz Truss would by now be Prime Minister, I would have thought that was inconceivable. I would have said it might be someone like Sunak or Kwarteng or someone like that. But it never occurred to me that it would be Liz Truss. So you were way ahead of me on that one. And I do think that, by the way, is an important change in Britain, because for the first time that I can remember in British history, and I studied British history going all the way back to the time of Cromwell. This is the first time that I can remember when a British Prime Minister has been picked purely on the criterion of ideological orthodoxy. In other words, the fact that this person is ideologically reliable, completely disregarding the fact that this person is in every other respect obviously inadequate for the role. Now, anybody who is familiar with the British administrative system, the governmental system in Britain, and you're yourself a civil servant, will know that if the Prime Minister is not up to the job, if the Prime Minister can't set realistic policies, get ministers working, talk to civil servants, push the policy through, deal with the House of Commons, anybody knows that without that kind of Prime Minister, the whole system seizes up. Other countries can work to a certain extent under automatic pilot. Britain doesn't work like that at all. And that's one of the problems we have in Britain. And we are once again, but in a much worse situation than we were with Theresa May, in a situation where we no longer have government, we have administration. And Britain cannot work without government. It cannot work without an effective Prime Minister. But certainly, it's very alarming that, as I said, a Prime Minister has been picked this time, purely on ideological criteria. Now, you brought up Kwasi Kwarteng, and again, I have to make a disclosure here. I know him not very well. We're not friends, but I've met him several times. You know, we've had dinner together. He's somebody with whom I am familiar with. And I'm going to say this. I agree with your assessment of him. I think he's a highly intelligent man in a certain way. In other words, I think he's basically an academic. I don't think he has that practical knowledge of how businesses work, of how economies work, of the kind of problems that small businesses run into that you need if you're going to be an effective finance minister in any modern economy. In that, by the way, he is not unusual nowadays. We're getting very strange people being appointed to senior positions all over the world. But of course, Kwarteng is just the example that we have here. The third point is that, of course, sticking to the line on Ukraine is now becoming the touchstone of ideological orthodoxy. And as I said, if you're appointed to your post on ideological criteria exclusively, that means you have to stick to the line on Ukraine. You haven't got any prospect of going anywhere close to power if you don't talk the right talk on Ukraine. If you talk about, the need to do deals, to start negotiations, to look for ways out, to start worrying more about the guilt market than to do about Ukraine, then all that does is that it proves to the political elite, to the establishment, that you're no longer politically reliable and you can no longer continue as prime minister. And that is a disastrous situation because, of course, Ukraine, in my opinion, the problems around Ukraine, the conflict connected to Ukraine is at the heart of so many of our problems. And last but not least, I don't want to dwell on this because this is a difficult topic on any platform, particularly on this particular platform where we're speaking on at the moment, but on drugs. I'm afraid if you spend any time in London, well, you will find wherever you walk that what you describe takes place absolutely in the open to an extent and a degree which I would have considered unimaginable. Now, you talked about businesses. You talked about the conditions that people are experiencing. And this is the one point where I am going to push back because I think people are becoming increasingly concerned. I think you see that in the opinion polls. You see that in the fact that the Conservative Party's opinion poll rating is collapsing. I think that it's certainly true that a lot of people watch reality TV and all that, but I don't think that it's enough to take away the concerns that people had. There's a Chinese philosopher, I've said this many times, who once said that the clever ruler empties people's minds and fills their bellies. But of course, if you're going to do that and you're going to do that successfully, you have to fill people's bellies. If people's minds and bellies are empty, then they start to think and it becomes more dangerous. And I think we are starting to be there in Britain. The problem is there is no political alternative at the moment. And would you agree with me on that second point? Because you look at the alternatives that the political system is presenting and they don't exist. What is your feeling about that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Keir Starmer is just wet potato bag, really. I mean, there is no charisma. He's not really taking advantage of what's happening, and I feel that British people do not trust him. You're right, Alex. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I remember the Iraq War, and I believe I was there. There was about 2 million people protesting out in the streets against the government, not because of the war, but because they were against the government. They were against government policies. Tony Blair at the time. I don't see anything like that now. I mean, people are not protesting. I mean, but also people don't understand why we are in this situation. We are in this situation because of the rising oil prices and rising gas prices, and everything stems from Ukraine. Everything stems from Russia. The way to get put an end to all of this, is to end all of these sanctions and reverse everything. And people don't understand that. People think that you can just wave a magic wand and everything, your inflation will go back to normal. And the thing that Liz Truss did the other day, where she almost destroyed the pound with her tax cuts and all of these other mini budget stuff. Nobody in the West, no British person, no media was actually saying the obvious thing. Start talking with Russia, make a peaceful deal, pull back the sanctions, and that's gonna fix most of the problems. But nobody's talking about that. Everyone's thinking that there's some sort of magic wand, and you can just fix inflation. And the Bank of England's completely oblivious to everything. They all they're doing is following what the Fed does. If the Fed increases interest rates, the Bank of England does the same thing. If the Fed does one thing, the Bank of England does exactly the same thing. They don't have a mind of their own. They feel that increasing interest rates will fix everything, but it's not. It's just making things worse, because the inflation is rising. They're putting the world, the country, into recession, and obviously people have said this is stagflation. And I was listening to one of your videos as well, and it's going to be worse than stagflation. Absolutely right. We are heading to an unbelievable amount of depression if this continues, and they're going to have to increase interest rates to basically inflation levels, which is above 10%. I believe it's 20% or probably more than that, to be honest, because if you go to the supermarket and you compare everything, every item, and if you look at the price of every item and compare it to what it was last year, you'll find that a lot of items have increased by 50%. Some items have increased by 100%. Your gas and electricity bills have gone up by 400%. Inflation, they're saying, is about 10%. I don't believe that. You just have to go out on the streets and you can see inflation is well above 20, 30% even. And and then increase the interest rates. It's not going to improve the situation. It's just going to make things worse, because people are going to lose their homes. People are going to default in their loans. People are going to be homeless. People are not going to be able to feed their kids. People are going to go hungry in the winter. People are not going to be able to warm their kids during the winter. It's just going to make things worse, and people are already suffering. I can see all around me right now. People are literally. One of my friends, he said he knows someone who actually committed suicide because he just cannot take this situation. So he just went and offed himself. And apparently the suicide rate has gone up over the past few weeks, if you look at the articles that are coming out. And also, Alex, you just have to look at the papers as well. The papers are just disgusting. I read an article yesterday by the Daily Mail, and they were actively cheering for that bomb that went off in the Crimean Bridge. They were actively, cheering. They were saying, "Happy birthday, Vlad." And none of these UK papers are talking about terrorism. This is purely a terrorism act, and they spent 20 years fighting terrorism. 1 million people killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. Trillions of pounds spent in fighting terrorism, and now they are actively celebrating the fact that people are going there killing themselves in truck bombs and things like that, and they're celebrating it. They are just encouraging it. I just can't believe where we are right now. I can't believe it.
The whole coverage of the war in Britain, to my mind, shows a degree of inhumanity and callousness, which I find quite chilling. They talk about it, they gloat about news of Russian defeats, even when they're fictitious defeat, in a way that I have to say shows absolutely no human empathy at all. And that article, which I did read, by the way, in the Daily Mail, and other articles that I've read in other newspapers, I find absolutely horrendous. But of course, the war is also entertainment. It's a way, you keep the British people busy because, you give them a picture of an exciting events that are happening on the other side of Europe. The sort of dark forces of the Dark Lord are being thrown back by this heroic army of gallant people that Britain is in touch with. So war is presented in that way, it is exciting. It's, dare I say, even entertaining. I mean, I find it absolutely cynical and unpleasant. I mean, not just unpleasant, abhorrent. But I mean, I can understand that it does serve that use, actually. I mean, it does give people something that they can talk about, where they feel that the forces of good and light are winning over the forces of evil and darkness. And it does have that quality. Far better, far easier, far more attractive to talk about that than the crisis in the gilts market. But this is the other thing, because I have to say, if you look at the history of this Conservative government, which came to power in, I think, 2010, one of the oddities about it is how completely inconsistent it's been. So we had a period of austerity. There was going to be austerity. They were going to cut everything, balance the budgets, resolve our financial problems. Then, of course, we got the Brexit wars, and they were going to lead us through Brexit. When they eventually got Brexit done, Johnson came along. He was going to get Brexit done. He was going to unleash the very real entrepreneurial drives that exist in Britain. I actually thought that he might do that. I've never particularly liked Johnson, but I did think that Johnson was a politician with some political skills, if nothing else, and genuine charisma. I agree with your characterization of Starmer as having no charisma. Somebody said that he has as much charisma as wet concrete. So that gives you some idea of what people think about Starmer and his lack of charisma. But anyway, I did think that Johnson, for all his many flaws, might actually, make some use of the opportunities which I do personally believe Brexit offered. Nothing like that. We got instead, well, first we had the pandemic, which we can't really talk about in too much detail because our friends and watchers get nervous when we do. So we got to be careful what we say. But we then got Ukraine. And, this has now become, as I said, the big thing that everybody has to line up and support. And if you don't, you can get into serious problems, especially if you're a political leader. And now we have this new plan, which is the reverse of Cameron and Osborne. Cameron and Osborne, all about austerity, fiscal orthodoxy, balancing the budget, bringing back sound money. Now you have Liz Truss and Kwarteng. Sound money, we don't know what that means. We're going to spend, we're going to support everybody's household gas bills, we're going to cut taxes, we're going to reflate, we're going to do all of these things. And I'm finding it increasingly difficult to keep up with his government. I mean, it seems to do one thing one year, the opposite the next. And it astonishes me that people don't point this out. They don't point out the sort of incoherence of the whole thing, which is on a scale that I've never seen before.
You're right, Alex. And when Boris came into power, and the first thing he should have done is jump on a plane and fly to every single country around the world and start pulling out free trade deals. He did none of that. Britain was starting from scratch. It's like a baby. Obviously, he's just left the EU. What we needed was trade deals with the rest of the world. He did none of that. I think the only two ridiculous trade deals he did was with Japan and Australia, and even they are benefiting more than benefiting us.
Actually, who was the trade secretary at that time?
Liz Truss. Liz Truss.
There we go.
And then Trump obviously kind of promised UK if they did the Brexit, and USA would provide a free trade deal with UK as a priority. None of that's happened as well. So it's almost like the UK is just a puppet of the United States for no reason, no benefit whatsoever. It's just sake of just being a puppet. They're just doing it. And so Boris Johnson, and obviously I work in the government, and a lot of people are asking the same question, and they feel that he's always drunk as well, because I meet him a few times, and I feel like he's always drunk when he's walking around. He's just not there most of the time. I feel like Boris Johnson became prime minister just for the thrill of it all. Just he wanted that PM name put in front of it. But he didn't want to do any work. He did, I feel that he was just there. When he signed the Brexit, I just feel that he just wanted to be the prime minister who signed Brexit. So he went and signed it. We didn't even argue about anything, and then next thing you know, there's issues with Northern Ireland and things like that. So I feel like he's a really lazy prime minister. He doesn't feel like wants to do any work. When he goes and does his press conferences, you feel like he's always drunk. He's talking about Peppa Pig in 1 minute. He's talking about, I just did not find him very good when you compare, the previous prime ministers to Boris. But then Boris Johnson found an escape route when he came to Ukraine. All of the failings of the Tory government over the years, and we're talking about Brexit, and we're talking about all this ridiculous money printing that they did during the pandemic. 600 billion that disappeared out of the coffers and went into fat cats. And now Ukraine's come along, and I feel that they are using Ukraine as a way to take out, just use that as an excuse for all of their failings. And we've come to the position now where obviously with Brexit, I mean, Brexit is a huge issue. You basically destroyed all of your trade links to the rest of Europe. You just have to look at where UK is compared to Europe. We're just across the channel, and there's all of these countries in the EU who have been trading after Brexit amongst themselves, and UK is isolated. And when you want to trade with Europe, it's much easier to trade with your neighbor rather than send goods all the way to Japan or Australia. I mean, look at how much it's going to cost when it comes to the high oil prices right now. So what they should have done is basically worked out free trade deals with the rest of the world, worked out free trade deals with Europe, worked out trade deals with USA. None of that. He just sat on his chair and just enjoyed being a prime minister, doing his parties and during lockdown. And now you have Truss, which is even worse. And people are just now asking for Boris to come back. I mean, when people are asking for Boris to come back, she must be really, really bad. And she's doing the same thing now. She's obviously, her focus now is Ukraine. She's talking about starting a NATO summit, talking about Ukraine. She wants to lead the free world. And another thing that Britain has done, after Brexit, they've alienated China, which is the second largest economy in the world. They've alienated, obviously, Russia, alienated the Middle East as well. All they've done is just alienate themselves and make enemies. I just don't understand why they would go around do that. Because when you just get out of Brexit, your first priority should be your own interest and work out deals with Russians, work out deals with Chinese, and become neutral. I mean, there's no harm in being neutral around the world. There's no harm in it,
Well,
go on.
what I always say, because this is what I've been around for a while, as they say. I mean, the way the City of London used to work once upon a time, as I can remember, was that it was open for business with pretty much everybody. It may surprise people. I can remember there was a time when there was increasing concern about the fact in some, NATO capitals that the British were so open, for example, to Russian banks. We had a big Russian bank, the Moscow Narodny Bank, based in London, for example. And, people were worried about that, but that was what we did. We were open for business with everybody. We were the last people, therefore, to embrace sanctions. I mean, that wasn't what Britain did. Now, given that we are, as you rightly said, outside the EU, surely that was what we needed to do again. Be open for business with everybody. Make those trade deals, go around the world, do all of those sort of things. And by the way, about Boris Johnson's alcohol problem, you're absolutely right. I was hearing more and more reports about this whilst he was prime minister. I saw signs of it myself. And again, one of the most extraordinary things about that was the way in which the media in Britain absolutely didn't discuss that topic, because even though it was clear to me that the prime minister, and I, having spoken about the importance of the prime minister in the British system, when the prime minister was incapable, physically incapable much of the time because of this habit that he had, the fact that nobody was talking about it did astonish me. And I still can't understand, given that Boris is not without enemies, why people never brought it up. What is the mood in the civil service now? Again, the civil service in Britain, we've always thought of as, the Rolls-Royce organization, everything works around it. What is the mood in the civil service? What do people see?
Yeah, so we've had an email coming around this morning that they're going to have to get rid of 6,000 personnel. So they're looking at making redundancies. So people are not happy. I mean, people are not happy with the way things are going because the government is forced to cut public services here. I mean, Liz Truss is also talking about cutting benefits as well, cutting NHS, but she's also asking for the military budget to be increased to 3% of the GDP as well, and it's absolutely crazy. And yeah, so the mood is not very good. People know they're going to be losing their jobs, and this is the thing with bond markets, Alex. I mean, the way the bond markets works, you have a yield price, and this yield is going out of control. And when the yield price goes high, this means that the government will have to pay more for interest. And this obviously goes out the coffers. So they're going to have to do one of three things. They're going to have to either print money to pay that off. They're going to have to cut services as well, or they're going to have to increase taxes. And none of the options are going to be good, because with the way inflation is going, nobody is going to be happy about more taxes on top of that. If they print money, that inflation is going to go up higher. And obviously, if they cut services, which Liz Truss is talking about now, looks like that's where they're going, because now they're cutting jobs. Now they have to cut. I saw an article this morning as well how Liz Truss is going to be cutting benefits, and some people are not going to have any benefits at all. So things are not looking good in UK. And Alex, London used to be a capital of Russians. There was a huge influx of Russians that used to come to London, and they used to obviously buy properties. And this is one of the reasons why London property prices went through the roof, because you had all of these Russians coming in and buying properties, buying golden visas and stuff. But what you have now is all of these Russians they are targeting. They're all leaving the country, and they are taking money with them. You have Roman Abramovich. You have all of these Russian oligarchs moving to Dubai, and these Russians are not going to want to put their money into UK anymore. And one of the main reasons London has been becoming rich over the years is because of the huge influx of Russians coming in, putting money into the economy. And now they've sanctioned every single Russian. It doesn't matter. As long as you're Russian, you're going to get in trouble, or you're going to get sanctioned. And Russians don't want to, they don't want to invest in UK anymore. And you've seen what they've done with Russian assets like yachts and properties, bank accounts being frozen. So UK is not a safe location for Russians anymore. But then other people are looking at it as well. You have a lot of Chinese investors taking their money out of London, because they've seen how London reacted during the sanctions against Russia, and you have rich Arabians taking their money out as well. There's a famous Hong Kong tycoon who owns half of Hong Kong in terms of properties. He had a lot of properties and investments in London. There's an article that I've seen recently that he's taken all of his money out. So you see, London is going to become much poor because of it, and all of this is because of the actions and the sanctions against Russia, because China's looking at it. They're thinking, oh, hang on, we're going to be next. If London decides to sanction China, we're going to be targeted. The Middle East, Saudi Arabians are looking at it as well. And when you take such actions against the Russians, it's never a good thing, because the whole world is going to see what you're doing. This is exactly the same as, the dollar. People don't have any trust for the dollar anymore, because they know that if you're a country and you get sanctioned by the USA, your central bank is going to be blocked, and you won't, and your whole economy will crash because of it. And now you see people now turning into a more of a multipolar world. But the problem right now, they can't get rid of dollars, because dollar is a very safe currency. And this is why the dollar is getting stronger, because the countries need the dollar, and you need the dollar because of the petrodollar. You need to buy oil, you need to gas, you need to buy raw material, you need to buy gas, and you need dollars for that. And but I think over the next 10, 20 years, you will see countries using less and less of the dollar. And it's a shame how they've sanctioned Russia, to be honest, Alex. I mean,
Yeah,
I was at work, and I remember, I remember people, British parliamentaries, actually celebrating. They were celebrating with all these sanctions they were placing on Russia. They were
yeah,
actively laughing and celebrating. And I can imagine that room they were in. They were probably frothing in their mouths, thinking,
yeah,
"Yeah, we're going to
yeah.
destroy the Russian ruble. We're going to destroy the Russian economy." And they were coming out laughing and smiling, thinking, "Yeah, what a great job we're doing." And now look at them; they're all quiet now. They're quiet. You got Von der Crazy not saying anything about it anymore. When she was, a few months ago, she was saying, "Oh, we're gonna be destroying the Russian economy." Biden said it's gonna the rubble, ruble turn into rubble. None of these guys are saying anything now. They're all quiet. You notice nobody's saying anything about the Russian economy. It's their own economies that are collapsing.
Our own. You're completely correct about this. I mean, I have to say this is I've discussed it. We've discussed this many times on the Duran. I was absolutely incredulous at the start of this year when the sanctions war began, at the sort of sense of exaltation, intoxication of the political class, not just in Britain, when they were doing this thing. And of course, for Britain to do it was particularly stupid because, of course, you can argue that opening up your economy to, Russian oligarchs, Saudi oil billionaires, all that kind of thing, might not be the best and most intelligent model for your economy. But if it is the model you've got, then starting a sanctions war, which is going to scare all the others too, is not perhaps the best way to go about it. Now, I have a friend of mine, it's a very high-end estate agent in London. He's very big, he sells big properties. He says to me that the market is dying and that, Gulf money, which used to come in, is also dwindling. It's not coming here, despite the rise in oil prices, which means that they have money to spend. And I was reading this morning that Kwarteng is now trying to speak to Saudi companies to try to get them to continue investing in Britain and presumably to buy British bonds, and is not having much success in doing it. So that's what happens. If you're going to run your economy in that kind of way, you have to accept that you have to keep your partners, your business partners, trusting you and happy. You slam doors in some faces, they're going to say, well, I'm next, if they're not affected directly, and they're going to go and they're going to take out their money. And that's exactly what is happening. It's a grim picture, an altogether grim picture. I'm going to finish with one thing, and then I'm going to hand over to Alex, which is that you talked about the fact that Liz Truss and Kwarteng are now talking about cutting benefits. Of course, electorally, that is disastrous. And there's a simple reason why that is. Because, of course, the reason they got this big majority back in 2019 was because they got working class support in the so-called red wall constituencies, places where people supported them because of Brexit. Those are people who rely heavily on benefits. If working class voters in these places start to see their benefits being cut, they're not going to vote Conservative in the next election. And I can see now how this is going to strip the Conservatives of their majority. So, I mean, it's a misguided policy electorally, but I agree, by default, it's the one that Truss and Kwarteng seem to be drifting towards. Anyway, Alex, I've spoken for 50 minutes with AJ. Perhaps you have some things you'd like to put to him.
Yeah, question to you, Alexander, and to AJ as well. And it's the title of this live stream. Is Liz Truss going to escalate with regards to Russia and Ukraine? Is she going to take it a step further than what Boris did, the damage that he did in Ukraine? What do you guys think?
Well, I'm going to answer that first. I'm going to say yes and no, in the sense that she's going to be as vehement as Boris was. She's going to send more weapons and more things, than before. She's going to call NATO meetings. In practice, there's little more than she can do. So Boris did the damage. Liz is going to continue with it, but she can't make it worse because it is already so bad that you can't make it worse than it already is. That's my view. What do you think, AJ?
I completely agree with you. I mean, you just have to look at her priorities when she came into power by calling Zelensky as the first leader, rather than the US. You have to look at why she's come to power in the UK, and obviously, the neocons love her, the military industrial complex love her, and you'll notice that Boris spent more time in Ukraine than dealing with the issues in UK. I mean, he was flying off to Ukraine rather than having meetings with his constituents, and this is one of the reasons Boris had to go, because he was putting far too much time into Ukraine. And I feel that Liz wants to do the same, but she's currently under a lot of pressure with regards to the economy. And you can see she's absolutely getting hammered by the media at the moment. He's getting hammered. And I think she's just looking over her shoulder whether she can survive her job. And I think that right now, 99% of UK, I'm talking about people, the media, they're all hammering Liz to try and fix the economy. And I think that's what she wants to do. But then you also got the military industrial complex and neocons telling her, we put you in power, so you need to do what you're supposed to do. And this is why she's called this NATO meeting. And I feel that she's stuck at the moment, but I'm also speaking to a few people. They can't. It seems like they can't get rid of her for at least a year. I think it's part of the UK constitution that you can't get rid of a leader unless they've served at least a year as a prime minister. So she's got a year basically. So the people.
Is
I mean,
that
you'll
true?
know. Yeah, I think I read somewhere.
That's
Yeah,
true.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure.
Mm,
But
mm,
you'll see that she's putting the blame on others. She's putting the blame on Kwarteng when it comes to the
mm,
pound crushing. She's putting the blame on Putin, and I feel that she's probably going to survive for another year
mm,
until they decide to get rid of her. But she will want to double down on Ukraine. I think she will double down, giving them more money, more weapons. But I don't think UK has got much weapons left. I don't think UK has got much money left. There's only so much they can do. Even Boris couldn't do much as well. I think Boris offered to train Ukrainian soldiers in Britain and then send them back. And most of them are probably already dead because they were involved in the Kherson offensive and
mm,
Kharkiv and things like that. And it wasn't a big number. It wasn't really a big number they were training. So I don't know what Liz Truss can do. I think she can probably give more money, but if she gives more money to Ukraine, I believe that's going to be the end of it, because people in UK are not going to stand for it, especially when people are getting hungry. People are getting cold during winter, and there she is giving money to Ukraine. I think at that point, people will start standing up. The media will probably support her, but I don't think the
mm,
people will support that move. So she's stuck, really. I think she wants to give more stuff to Ukraine, but I don't think she can. I think she's now focused on what's happening, and again, she's not really. There's no much respect when it comes to NATO. I mean, she's called a NATO meeting, but what can she do? I mean, no other world
mm,
leader actually respects her. She doesn't have that
mm,
she doesn't have that strength, the leadership qualities other countries will listen to. Or, she may have called the meeting, but there's not really much she can do, to be honest. I think um, there's not much any Western leaders can do. I mean, you have Schultz going around the world, going to Saudi Arabia, and a lot of people don't realize that Germany had a arms embargo against Saudi Arabia. So he went to Saudi Arabia and he said to MBS, okay, we're going to start selling you weapons again. You give us oil. And he's come back to Germany. And I saw an article on a German paper saying what a fool Scholz is, because now they're sending Saudi Arabia all German weapons, and they've got rid of the embargo, but Saudi Arabia in return has not really given much to Germany. They've not promised any oil. They've not, in fact, as you know from the latest stuff that's happening, they've agreed to cut production by 2 million barrels a day. So all these German media is now focusing on Scholz, just saying what a weak leader he is. I don't think the Western leaders, I don't think any of them are kind of got the balls to actually speak the truth and say, what we need to do is just make a peace deal with Russia. Let's roll back all of the sanctions. Let's start opening up Nord Stream 2. These are, no Western leader has got the balls to say that. I think they're all just following their own tails, really, chasing their own tails.
Okay, so my final question to that is, will NATO get involved in the conflict in Ukraine, given what happened with the missile strikes and the continuous missile strikes, because they haven't ended?
No.
We've had a lot more missile strikes this morning. Is the only option then for NATO to get involved, because the other option of trying to find some sort of settlement with Russia is off the table? We have a lot of weak leaders who are facing a lot of troubles at home, and they need a distraction. Individually, they don't have the guts to escalate with Russia, but together as a collective, perhaps NATO is what they're looking for in order to ramp up with Russia. What do you guys think? Or is NATO going to stand firm? And it has stood. It's a proxy. I mean, Ukraine is fighting a proxy war, but NATO has stood firm in their narrative, saying that we're not going to be a party to this war. That's what NATO has been saying for the past 7 months, even though everyone understands this is a proxy, that the Ukraine army is a proxy. But is NATO going to change that narrative now?
AJ, I'd be very interested in your thoughts about this, especially as you work within government. I mean, so tell us your thoughts.
Sure. I just don't think NATO will do anything. I mean, if they wanted to join in, they would have done it by now. And first of all, they don't have any weapons left, because all of it has been siphoned off into Ukraine, and most of it's being destroyed by Russia. And you just have to look at how much ammunition is needed in a war like this. I mean, even I've seen an article where USA has said that they're running out of weapons as well to send to Ukraine. Britain's definitely run out of weapons. And I've also read an article that Germany has only got weapons to last them 2 days if they went into war. So I just don't think NATO has anything left, and they know that. And they know that if they go into war with Russia, they will lose, because they've got no weapons left. They've got nothing. The only way they can escalate is if they use tactical nuclear weapons, but then Russia has got tactical nuclear weapons as well. So I don't think they would want to go along that route either. So I don't think NATO would be able to do anything, to be honest. I think they'll probably huff and puff and just stick to the same position they are in now. I don't think that they have got the guts or the will, or neither are they in a position to fight with Russia right now.
I completely agree. And can I just also say something else? I mean, I as I said, I have a slightly different perception of British opinion than AJ does. I don't think it's quite as zombified. I think if you want to galvanize the British public, you would do so by sending British troops to Ukraine to fight Russia. I think that would not go down well with the British public at all. And I'm sure that the same is true to an even greater extent across the rest of Europe. There might be a few places, Poland, the Baltic states, perhaps Romania, where you might find some enthusiasm for such an enterprise. I don't think you'd find it in Britain. And I think, as I said, there'll be immediate opposition to it from British people, and even more so from other parts of Europe as well. So on top of the technical problems, the fact that we don't have the weaponry any longer to do it, I don't think there's any intention of doing it, because however incompetent our political class is, I think they do sense that this is something too far, that this would be taking Britain, taking the West to a place where, Western electorates, Western people simply won't go. It would be Iraq times 500 in terms of the opposition it would provoke. I will say one thing, though. They have no plan. They're doubling down on something that has failed, and they don't have an off-ramp. Now, Biden in all those extraordinary nuclear Armageddon talk was talking about Putin needing an off-ramp. It is they who need an off-ramp. They're trying to find, they're hoping that something will turn up, that Russia will crack, that it will run out of missiles, that the ruble will collapse, that there'll be an internal coup, that something like that will happen. Because actually, they don't have options. All they can do is cross their fingers and hope that this thing, which they don't have the political will to change, is somehow going to come right in the end. That's my own view.
Completely agree with you. And also, I just want to also talk about something that not many people talk about. The explosion in Nord Stream 1 and 2 that occurred. Not many people actually talk about this in the media, or nobody's actually using their common sense. If Russia wanted to blow out that pipeline, don't you think they would have blown it up near the Russian border? Because the pipeline goes from Russia all the way to Germany. Why blow it up more near the German side? I mean, it'd be much easier to blow it up near the Russian borders, right? So, and it makes no sense, because those waters are always patrolled by NATO ships, and Sweden, Finland, Lithuania. I mean, it's and other Baltic states, and also a lot of US ships are going around there as well. It's a worse location to blow up a pipeline, and I can't believe all of these papers and people are still going out with that story. It's ridiculous.
That's the genius of Putin, AJ. that's his genius. Oh boy, yeah. The Swedish authorities, last I read, they came out with a statement and said that they're not going to share their findings with the investigation with Russia. But they did say something interesting, and maybe we can close it out on this point. And I don't know if you know this, Alexander, as far as if this is a legal issue, but Sweden said, or at least the prime minister said, that Russia can investigate if they want.
Yeah.
In other words, she said they're welcome to enter this area and investigate if they feel like they want to do it, which I thought was kind of interesting, because I thought this was an EEZ area for Sweden. But do you guys, AJ, Alexander, do you know anything about that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, the point she's making, the reason she's saying that, and here's the thing about the Nord Stream pipelines, which people are completely overlooking, is, of course, that pipeline is at least partly Russian owned. It's their property. I mean, Gazprom has shares in it. I mean, it doesn't own it all, by the way, but it does have significant shares in it. So entirely plausible, reasonable for them to know what the investigation is. The West doesn't want to share the details of its own investigation. So better to try and parry any legal challenge, which there might be, because it's conceivable that the Russians could bring a legal challenge by saying, oh, well, we are not going to share the results of our investigation, but the Russians are fully entitled to conduct their own investigation. The problem is they're not going to let the Russians conduct an investigation. They might pretend that they are. They might say, well, it's fine for the Russians to conduct an investigation. But we all know, as night follows day, that all kinds of technical issues, all kinds of problems will be discovered, which make a Russian investigation all but impossible. So, they'll say, yes, of course, you could send divers in to have a look, but they're restricted to, 15 minutes in any 48-hour period, which has to be signaled 72 hours in advance, and then only if, the new moon is out or whatever it is. I mean, they will find some way to make sure that investigation, that Russian investigation, if it's ever launched, doesn't happen. And if it does happen, well, it's fine, because whatever results it has, whatever results it comes up with, you just ignore them. You say, well, that's the Russians. They're just the Russians saying that. We don't need to listen to what the Russians are saying. We obviously rely entirely on what our own investigation, which is by definition objective and impartial, that's the true investigation. And that's why we rely on it. So, that's why she's saying this. But it doesn't really mean anything, and it's not intended to. A proper investigation by an impartial, objective international agency, of which, by the way, none any longer exist because they've all been, basically taken over and suborned in various ways. But that kind of investigation, which did once happen. I mean, once upon a time, agencies like that did exist. There were lots of them. They were part of what made the world system work. That is what this kind of situation calls for, but it's not going to happen.
I have a completely different take on it. And obviously this pipeline was burst over a week ago, may have been a couple of weeks now. You can't just go to a murder scene after 2 weeks and expect to do a full investigation. You need to do an investigation there and then. It's given them 2 weeks to do anything. They can go down there, clean all the, take away all of the evidence. Anyone, they could do it in a day or two. You just can't murder someone and expect to go to the murder scene 2 weeks later and expect to do a full investigation. It just doesn't work. And I think maybe the reason she's saying that is because maybe they've cleaned up all of the evidence and they're saying, all right, now you can go in, you can do whatever you want. It's just, it's ridiculous. And you're right, Alex. I mean, it's just the way the media is working. You'll notice that they're very quiet about it as well. Germans are not saying anything. The Europeans are not saying anything. If the Russians really did it, this would have been front page news in every single paper. All of these leaders and Europeans leaders will stand up and say, how could Russia do this? They'll be saying it for weeks. The fact that they've all gone quiet after a day, it shows that the United States probably told them, just quiet it, just be quiet, don't mention it anymore. Don't even tell your papers not to even mention it. Let's just keep things quiet. And it just shows that the strange behavior by the US. I mean, they're really acting strange. They're saying, oh, this is a great opportunity for the US. They're not really even denying it. They're not, it's absolutely ridiculous. And the Germans are very quiet. I think they know that. They know truly who did it, but they can't say anything. They can't do anything. And they just, they just have to act like puppets like they've always done. It's a shame, Alex. I mean, I remember the great European leaders. You got the great French leaders I can't remember his name now, but he actually stepped out of NATO. And you got
De Gaulle.
De Gaulle, and you got Jacques Chirac, who was completely against the Iraq War, and he was the only leader who actually said, "I don't believe a word you guys are saying." There's no European leader apart from Orban just actually standing up to this, stupidness. And you're right, they're having cocktail parties and they're laughing and joking in their cocktail parties. They're part of the club, and none of them are caring about what's happening to Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is losing all its people. The amount of military people that have been dying through these offensives, we're talking about thousands per day, and not counting the pound of people that are injured. They are losing all their men. They're now calling up women to go into the army. They're calling up old people to go into the army as well. They're running out of people. All businesses have left Ukraine. You got a third of Ukraine probably gone over the border to Poland and other places as well. There really isn't much left that Ukraine has as an economy, as people. They don't really care about that. They're just happy to prolong this as long as they can and fight till every last Ukrainian. And the fact is, Ukrainian people are also completely oblivious to this. I mean, you've seen pictures of, people taking pictures of that big postage stamp they got off the bridge, of the Crimean bridge. They're all happy and they're spreading out on Twitter and social media. I mean, do they not understand how they're being used by the West, and they're completely been destroyed? And here they are sending out this propaganda And even the Daily Mail, like I've mentioned, but even the Daily Mail refuses to say it's a terrorism act. They're calling it an explosion. If you look at the heading, they said this explosion. It's crazy. Indeed, I've never seen anything like it. In my time, I've never seen how stupid these world leaders are. I've never ever seen, how they got into power and who's. It's crazy, Alex. It's crazy.
I completely.
Yeah, we're seeing the results of these leaders, that's for sure. We're seeing the results that they deliver. Let's end it there, everybody. We have been going on for about an hour, 10 minutes plus. Fantastic. Everybody, I have AJ's channel information, PTE Geopolitics. I have that in the description box. I will add it as a pinned comment down below as well. Definitely check out his channel, subscribe to his channel. Fantastic work. AJ, thank you very, very much for joining us on this live stream.
Pleasure, guys. Pleasure. I've really appreciated the time. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And
keep up the great work. A huge pleasure for us, and come again, and we can talk about British. We can talk about British affairs, which are not without their interests.
I can go on all day about Britain affairs.
I do appreciate that. It might seem a bit parochial for us to talk about British things, but I'm always surprised how interested people are in Britain around the world. Comes from being the former imperial centre, no doubt, but there we are. So AJ, it's been a huge pleasure to have you on, a huge privilege, and we look forward again, as I said, to having you on soon.
Appreciate it, guys. Really, really thanks for having me on. Yeah, appreciate it.
Fantastic. And we will get to all the questions that everybody sent in a dedicated video as well. So me and Alex will do a dedicated video answering everyone's questions. And thank you to everyone that watched this live stream on ODYSEE, on Rumble, on YouTube, our Telegram chat, and of course, theduran.locals.com. Please check us out on theduran.locals.com. You can also check us out now on Rockfin as well. The link is in the description box down below. And thank you to all our fantastic moderators, Zariel, Valies, Spartan Warrior Queen, Alan Watson, Reckless Abandon, and the changed handle. I forgot what that handle is now. Someone changed their username, their handle on the moderation, and I forgot what that handle was. Facts matter. I think it's Facts Matter. All right. Thank you to our moderators, and we will end it there. What do you guys say?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Facts Matter. All right, we'll end it there. Take care, everybody.
Right.